All right. So we are going to pick up part two of our Django review. In part one, we, walked through from the very beginning of making uh, a Django app for to-do assignment, and we'll bring up our data model in just a moment. Data model is simple, right? List has a task, which has a subtask, and lists must belong to users. But once we go beyond models to working with serializers, it starts to get a little trickier. And we built out our user model um, with some basic information. And then we did build out some views for our user, mainly to create a user. And thank you guys for reminding me to do it the right way, so that passwords get hashed. We did add login here. By the way, there is more stuff to Django sessions that login and logout does, but we haven't seen it and we don't need it. I dropped the link in Zulu questions for anyone who's curious. And then we have not only sign up, but we have logging in, we have logging out, we have a basic info endpoint that just returns some user information that we're not even using a serializer for. If we have time, we'll make a put endpoint for updating a user profile. Then we went ahead and we built out the list for our to-do list. The model is relatively straightforward. We're using a base template model that has a name and if the list is completed or not, because list tasks and subtasks all kind of share this. So this is actually Django's version of an abstract class that we don't directly instantiate, but is inherited by other things. And so our list class inherits name and completed. A list must belong to a user, and we set up that relationship here. And we gave a nice related name so that from the user object, we can grab all of the user's lists. We have a very simple list serializer, and we kind of built this up one at a time, right? At first, we had fields equals just name and completed, and then we ran into an issue because we didn't have a user and a list has to belong to the user. And so we just ended up with all. We still have to deal with tasks because we didn't get to building tasks. But that's what's coming up next. And then for our views, we have creating a list. We have getting a list. And the most important thing here is this get object or 404 helper method that Django has can not only take a model, but it can take like an individual instance of a model or a query set response. And so by doing this, we make sure that it will only get this list if it belongs to the user, since the user is attached to the request object and token authentication. And using that token authentication here means this endpoint only gets hit if we have an authenticated user. I've written some skeleton code that we might come back to later. For lists, we have our URLs PY where we've got viewing an individual list, viewing all the lists, and indeed over here, we've got our get endpoint where we've got the lists firing off. And now our task, pun intended, I guess, is we have to build out some task stuff so we can view all the tasks that are on this list and add tasks and modify some tasks. And if we look over here to our task app, the task model is relatively simple, though we have two levels of inheritance. Our task template model inherits from that base template class. So a task has a name and a Boolean completed status. A task also has a description. And then over here, our task must belong to a parent list, which has, we've just given it a related name of tasks, so I can grab all the tasks on the list. And we've got some routing here. And this is what we were working on, I think, right before the break. And once that's done, we'll come here and maybe we'll do some individual task stuff. And I've written out some skeleton code here for all tasks. But I think our next step here is we have the serializer, and the task serializer is pretty straightforward and probably can remain straightforward. We really want all our task fields. So I think actually the task now is, now that I have a serializer, let's make real, let's maybe first start with the post endpoint to create a task for a list. And then we can deal with the endpoint to get all the tasks for a list. And then maybe we'll see if we want to go to this individual task stuff or circle back to the list serializer and fiddle around with that a bit more now that we have tasks. Hopefully that review kind of got our brains warmed back up. Do folks have any questions before we dive in? Okay, any special requests? I think we're going to cover most of the stuff that people were interested in, but anything in particular that you really want to see? Okay, how we doing? I know my brain is like just getting back into Django mode now. I don't know about everyone else.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, let's do it. So we need to be able to create some tasks. So let's start making this real. So this post request is going to take a bunch of stuff here in the body. And I think what I'm going to do is let's duplicate that tab. I kind of like to, in the post request, build what I'm sending to remind me when I'm writing the code here. And so a task has a name, and the name is going to be something like buy milk. And a task has a description, and the description might be something like get the milk. And then while we don't need to pass a completed status because the model has a default value, just for fun, let's set completed to false. So this is the JSON object or the dictionary that we'll be working with when we're building our task. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab a copy of that dictionary that has this JSON data so I can manipulate it and work with it. Next thing I'm going to do is I want to use get object or 404 to actually grab the list. So let me see if I've imported it. I have, which is perfect. And actually I have a duplicate import line here. So one moment, sorry. Let's I'll just call it the list. And excuse me, my brain is getting a little warmed up here. Now that should be doing what we want, and we're grabbing the list that we want to add this task to. And I'm going to go ahead and to this data object, set the parent list to the list ID. And the job of this line here, we may actually not need to do anything with this. We want to make sure the list exists and belongs to the user. So we might as well just write it this way, even though we get the list ID here. This sort of forces the code to do the right thing. And now let's use that task serializer. And as data, we'll pass in our data dictionary that now has the ID of our parent list. And now we can check if we have a valid task using the serializer's validation that also fires off the model's validation. We can go ahead and save the task, return a success response. That's going to look something like this, saying we successfully created a task. If that fails, let's return a response that shows whatever the errors are. And error status. And now we should be able to test this out and see how we do with creating this task. And it says method post not allowed. So I wonder if I just have something wrong in my URLs PY. Let's see here. Post was to API/lists/5. I forgot to put tasks at the end of here because I believe that's the endpoint we want to hit. So the best kind of mistake to make because it's easy to resolve. And now we have a more interesting error 404 not found. Um, Post API/lists/5/tasks. I wonder if let's make sure this list exists. It does. I must have something wrong in my routing. API lists, list ID, tasks, all tasks as view. I think we should be working here.
I mean, it was commented out.
Oh, what was commented out?
But was the path commented out?
Oh, no. Yeah, I have this commented out, but this is for later when we do an
Okay.
individual task. Yeah, but I do have these comments here that show it. Um, yeah, there should be something pretty simple here that's not happening because we've got API/list/5/tasks, but that sure seems to be doing it all tasks as view. Let's make sure my post method is where it belongs. All tasks, post, request, list, list ID. Um,
I guess I'm confused because I mean you had just have an empty path, I mean, for that URL. So where's
oh,
the path that says API
right,
lists and then the task ID and then
right.
tasks?
So in the URLs
Oh,
PY, there's
okay,
a
right
list
there.
tab.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I wonder if there's some sort of issue going on here. I think we should be able to get list ID passed in this way.
Yeah.
Um, I think that should be working. I'm actually not certain here. I wonder if this is the problem or if it's
Yeah,
something
do you need
much
a slash
simpler.
at the end of tasks? Is that why it's acting up?
You know
So in line
what?
13, you need a task
Yeah,
slash at the end.
yeah, yeah, I bet you're right. Thank you so much. My favorite kind of mistake. There we go. Good eye, Jason. Thank you. The slashes always kill me, and frankly, this is, at 4 o'clock, I stop coding because I end up making more bugs than I produce like working code. So now the slash is fixed. Our create task endpoint is working. All things are good. We can buy milk. Let's throw a couple other tasks in here real quick. like buy apples. Let's get some gala apples. And I don't know, let's buy peanut butter, right? And it will be crunchy. And so now I have a number of tasks. And now it will actually be really interesting to write a get endpoint that gives us all the tasks. So this is going to be way more straightforward. Let's go ahead and implement this. And we're going to use, again, the task serializer. Um, and I'm just going to pass it in request.user.lists.get ID equals list ID. Though I suppose actually we should do a get object or a 404 here. I take that back. So let's write ourselves a little get list helper method like we did before. And all it's going to do is return this line.
I'm busy. Sorry.
And nope, no worries. And we've got request here. We've got the list ID here. I think that should do the job. And now we can do the list equals self dot get list request list ID. And now I can do, and we can just call this list. I get a little paranoid about like upper versus lowercase, but the truth is they are really two different things. Now we can do tasks equals task serializer list. And now let's do many equals true. And we need to do list dot tasks. We want to grab all the tasks on this list. And now we can just return tasks.data and with a 200 response. And the nice thing about this get list method is because we do get object or 404, this really does our error handling for us. And if this works, I'll refactor the post endpoint to use it in just a minute. Let's just go ahead and duplicate this tab again. And we're going to make a get request and we don't need anything in the body. And let's see how we do. So let's see, internal server error, all tasks get list takes 2 arguments, but 3 were given.
Can you pass tasks in your get request?
Sorry?
On the right side in your postman, you put tasks after the 5.
Oh, that's okay. That's what we want. Right now, if I do this, this sends back. So it's a little bit of a theoretical distinction, but this uniquely identifies the list resource, right? And right now, our code for the list serializer and for this endpoint only returns the list name. In a minute, we're going to modify it to return the tasks as well, but we haven't done it. And think about Pokemon and moves. We might not want to see all the Pokemon moves when we view a Pokemon's information. Here, we're uniquely identifying all the tasks that belong to this specific list. And I think the issue here is I think I just forgot self as an argument because the error message said like 3 arguments were given to get list, but it was only expecting 2. And now that's working. So, and so now we can see what we want, which is all 3 of our tasks. And we can also see how, again, the sort of REST API design is really where like this URL helps us uniquely identify different resources so we can interact with them in different ways. And a good example might be like for this, maybe we want like tons of information about all the tasks. But if we do this, maybe we want a shorter list of task names. So And in a minute, I think we'll go back to that list endpoint, but let me just check in and see what questions folks have or what might be good to go over.
This is more like a conceptual question, since right now I'm planning out how I want to connect front end and back end.
Mhm.
Do I have to uh, put, in a sense, any variables in the URL to call my API? When in my head, I'm thinking that I would want to have all the information in the JSON response and just have Python go through it. Since I would know what would be in the JSON, I would know how to parse through it to go to a specific resource, make something, connect something without having to go through putting the resources names
Right.
or concepts in the URL.
Right. Basically, like when I'm making an HTTP request from React, do I want to put like when I need to pass data, do I want to put it here in this JSON in the request body, or do I want to put it here in the URL?
Hmm.
The answer is different things for different purposes. What we want to put in the URL, the idea with the REST API is indeed we want variables in here that identify the thing that we want.
Hmm.
And like the other reason is, let's say you want to share your list of tasks with me. Well, you can just send me that link, right? And I can open it up. And that's kind of the magic of a URL is you can share it with anyone. And in fact, let's go to Amazon real quick and let's search for science fiction books. So look up here in their URL. After this question mark, they don't use Q. I don't know why they use K maybe for keyword, but you can see the search right here. And then this is some other stuff. But this way, like if I'm like, hey, check out this list of science fiction books, I can share the URL with you, right? Or if I want to bookmark it and open it up later, I can get those search results. But if this was in the JSON and the body of an HTTP request, that would be impossible. So that's one of the big reasons why you see in REST API design all this stuff pushed into the URL. And here you can see this is like called a query param. While here what we're doing is there's no question mark, right? That would be like over here. It might be like Q, like let's find all the tasks with the word milk in them. That's a bit more advanced. We haven't really seen that, but this is how I uniquely can with design a REST API. So with URLs, I can show all the tasks belonging to a list and identify a list and stuff. What do you all want to do next? Do you want to update our lists endpoint? So now we see some tasks here, or do you want to do like some put and modification of things? Let's update this, right? Because and just to refresh ourselves on what this is, if I go over to my list app and the views, we have this post or we have this get endpoint here for all lists. And so I'm seeing all the lists that belong to me right now, right? And there's one for groceries and there's one for movies, but I'm not seeing any tasks. And the reason I'm not seeing any tasks is because the list serializer has nothing about tasks at all. And as Chase was saying, like, hey, maybe I want to see tasks here. So one way to do this is from the task app, we import the task serializer. And over here, we say tasks. And if we hop over to, let's go to the task model real quick.
Could you just add it as a field? So you'd say something like tasks equals task serializer, and then just add it as an extra field, and be
Yep,
able to pull it up that way. Is that possible?
that's pretty much what we're going to do. So the task model has this foreign key parent name, right? but the related name is tasks. And that means that I can do list.tasks off of the model. So our list model basically has a field named tasks, but because it's not a normal field, because it's a foreign key reference, we have to do exactly what you're saying, Jason. We have to tell the serializer how to represent this data. And I can't just do this. This is going to give me an error. And I don't know if the error message is very friendly. Type object da 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 is not JSON serializable. So I'm not sure how friendly the error message is. But what we need here is, because we're dealing with a bunch of tasks, we need many equals true. So the serializer knows what to do. And now fingers crossed that error should go away. And now we see indeed, when I look at all the lists, when I hit this get endpoint and I use the list serializer, now that we've added the tasks field here and told the serializer, here's how you can do it, use this task serializer. Now we get all of these tasks back, right? Now, maybe this is too much information for my list. Maybe this is sort of overkill. Maybe when I look at all the lists, I only want the name of the task and if it's completed. So let's kind of customize how we see tasks when we do it this way versus when we look at all the tasks for a specific list. Because what I want is, when I look at all the tasks for a specific list, I want everything, including the ID. But when I only look at a list, when I look at all the lists, I don't want to see everything for the tasks. I just want to see, or even an individual list here, excuse me. When I look at an individual list, or all the lists, I just want the task name and if it's completed. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to the task serializer, and we're going to make another serializer. We're going to call it, let's call it
Single task.
yeah, let's call it task summary serializer. It's a terrible name. I can't think of a good name. Or let's call it short task serializer. Really, we could call it whatever we want. But what it's going to do is it's going to show name and it's going to show completed. And then over here in the list app, we're going to use this short task serializer. And fingers crossed, now when I hit this endpoint to get all the lists, I see here, I only see name and completed. If I'm looking at an individual list, it's still the same, because the individual list is using the list serializer. But when I go tasks, we're using the task serializer and I see all the information. So there's a couple different ways to do this, but this is one really nice pattern, and and also shows how it can be nice to have multiple serializers for the same thing. I just want to check in and see what questions folks have or things that people might be curious about.
So when are you using the full task serializer?
Yeah, totally. I am using the full task serializer in our task app over here in views for this. And I'll put, so this is like API / lists / ID / tasks, right? When I want to see the resource of all the tasks, belonging to a list, then I'm going to use the full task serializer. And this is really for demonstration purposes. Like in terms of building a to-do list app, there's no particular reason, but you can imagine other scenarios like with Pokemon and moves, maybe where when I'm getting the Pokemon, I don't want like a massive JSON object with like every single detail of every single move. Maybe I just want a list of like move names and IDs or something. Yeah, good question. What other questions do folks have?
On your serializers, you have min equals true, but you're not using read only. Is there a reason for that?
Uh, Great question. I'm not using, yeah, let me hop over to the list serializer so we can see what you're talking about. Over here, short task serializer, many equals true. I'm not using read only because we are not doing any sort of like update or creation, any put or post requests that are trying to use these serializers right now. So I don't need it. The serializer right now in the code, there's nothing that's trying to use the serializer to write. Putting read only here won't hurt at all. In fact, it's a good practice, but we don't need it yet. And I was just thinking that we probably just get there in a little bit. Does that help answer your question?
It does.
Yeah, great question. Kenny, yes, sir.
I'm not sure if you covered this, but it's kind of like an abstract question. But how, okay, so if we're running this, how do we, when we have the URL, how does it know which database to go to? And what I mean by that is that if we're going to have multiple different clients or different people using our application, how do we prevent local hosts being like mine versus somebody else's?
Yeah, great question. Great question. Um, I'm gonna go a little bit down the rabbit hole, but then bring it back to the things we've been covering.
If it's too much, let me know.
No, no, no. This is a great question. So we haven't really talked about this big section here in settings PY called middleware. We did learn the other day that when we have to deal with cross-origin resource sharing, we have to like add the cores middleware thingy here. Basically, each of these is a function. When an HTTP request comes into Django, before it even gets to URLs PY, before it gets to our view code, it gets run through each of these functions in order. And this one right here, I think, authentication middleware, it's either session or authentication, but I think it's authentication. What it does is that function will look at the headers of the request and look at this token. And it'll talk to our Postgres database, figure out what user that token belongs to, and grab that user and attach it to the request object. And that's why if I go over to the views for, let's go to the list app. Over here, where we're getting all the lists that belong to the user, this request.user, this user object, this user model instance of me, when I've logged in, it's from that middleware and from that authorization token. And so this is how, when we're making HTTP requests, as long as we've logged in and we have this auth header that we're sending from React, Django will know who's logged in, and we can use this in our code to make sure we only get stuff belonging to that person.
So if there's no token, does that mean anybody can access the database? Well, I'm assuming if you have URL to get to
Yeah,
that.
it means because we've set up this token authentication, let's go to the definition. We've told Django any API view, right? Any view inheriting from this, if there's not a token that hasn't been authenticated, throw an error. So Django won't allow a request without the token. And then we get this error message: authentication credentials were not provided. So the React app's job is to keep track of the token, and that's a little outside of scope of today. But once we log in and we get the token, we do have to like pass it on every single HTTP request. And Django won't allow us for the API views like this one or here in the list app, it won't even let us run this code if there's not a valid token. What do you all want to see? We could do some like individual task stuff. We could like we could do if in the task app, where is it? We could do this with an individual task, or we could do like updating a list, modifying a list. Should we do some put?
I'd like to see put, but I'd also like to see a user serialized and how we would use that. Because we never use a serializer for a user, and I don't know if that's not specifically for the assessment, but wouldn't you use that in a real world application
Um, yeah,
for updating user credentials and whatnot?
it depends. Um, yeah, the short answer with the user serializer is, let's go back over here to our user model real quick. Sorry, it was just escaping from me. Like if we had a user profile page, then it probably makes sense to add this stuff and do it. And we probably can do a user serializer. Let's actually whip one up, and then let's do some put.
Okay.
So we're going to import our user. I'm actually going to go to some other serializer, and I'm going to steal the import line that we need. I'm going to go to my other serializer, and to be honest, I'm going to steal this. And I definitely don't want to change settings. Why? And so this is going to be a user serializer. And we're going to keep it really simple. And I think this will work, but let's find out. Let me close out some of these unneeded windows. And let's go to views for our user. And here on the info page, let's try to use the user serializer instead of doing it by hand. And you know what? No, I think that's fine. So I'm just going to comment this out so I don't lose track of it. And now I think we want to do something like this. Serialized user equals user serializer data equals request dot user. I'm not quite sure if we need this data because it's not coming in as JSON, but I don't think it'll hurt. And then we return a response. And if this has worked, we do serialized user dot data. Now, I'm not totally 100% that we won't run into a serializer issue, but this is a good start. Let's see, do I have a get endpoint for our user floating around? I do not. Let's make one right now. API slash users. And it looks like we have some sort of error. So let's see what the error is. When a serializer is past the data keyword, you must call is valid before attempting to serialize the data. So I think I'm just doing something a little backwards with my serializer because we don't need to get data in. We need to get data out.
Would you
Yeah.
do serialized user equal user serializer data equals user or request.user, and then if serialized user is valid, then save and return?
Well, we don't need to do that because we're not getting JSON coming in.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? When we get data from outside the system, that's when we have to validate it. Because we're grabbing this from the database, we know the data is already good. So I think my mistake was doing it this way, because this is what you do when you've got like request.data and like inside there is a new user or changes to a user, and I'm turning JSON into a Python dictionary that gets stuck into the database. But we're going the other way here. So we don't need to do that. And I think that was my mistake. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. And actually, it works. And this is actually a great example of things that we probably want to change. Um, and this is a great example of where we might want to customize a serializer. We can see here, in fact, that abstract user class that we inherited from adds all these fields. And we don't want all these things, right? I think I want email, age, display name, address, um, first name, last name, username. I definitely don't want a hash password, and I probably don't want all this other stuff either. So let's go to our user serializer, which is hiding over here. And let's grab username, email, first name, last name, address, age, um, display name. That ought to be a pretty good list. And now we have a much nicer list, right? Like, and I would never want to send back a password, even hashed. If I want a user to change their password, I have the user enter the new password. It gets sent to the server. And if we want to, make sure the new password is different from the old one, we do that server side. So this is a great example of the real world value of a serializer. I can have the model have all this stuff, but the serializer lets me control what I present, right? And in this case, I don't want to present all the dirty details of the user model in every single field, both for security reasons and for usability reasons. So I can use a serializer to just present what I want. And I could even make different user serializers for different situations. Yeah, great question, Tim.
So if we want to change passwords, would we first serialize hash the password and check if the hash is the same? And if it is, we would overwrite it, or
Um,
if it's not, or
yeah, essentially that's correct. We would do that server side though. We're not going to do it in the React app. And in fact, we can maybe do a little bit of that now. Let's um let's change some user information and we can in fact change the password. So let's hop over to, I think this is where we want to be because we've got our,
and real quick before you continue,
yeah.
I'm assuming with React there must be some form of hashing on React side because I cannot imagine it's anyway safe to pass a JSON that says password is this before it reaches the server to get hashed.
Um, let's see here. 1 minute. I want to make sure I don't have a typo in my code from something silly that I did. Um, Let me just fix this real quick before I forget or lose track. Yeah, I totally. There we go. So to answer your question, um, so you can do you actually really wouldn't do hashing of a password, but that's where like the S in HTTPS for secure comes in. When you have set up, I think it's called like secure socket layer, but with a SSL certificate, every single thing you send in HTTP requests with HTTPS is encrypted, but that's more complicated to set up. Um, Otherwise, you would be correct, and that was why, like, I think there were probably other ways, and that's a little out of scope. But there was a time, like in the much earlier days of the internet, where logging on to your bank at a coffee shop might not be a good idea if someone is, I think the term is like sniffing, like monitoring the traffic from that coffee shop's Wi-Fi router. But these days with the HTTPS insecure, most stuff that you send over the internet is encrypted from the get-go. Um, I'm honestly not expert in that domain, so there's probably more stuff, but that's sort of the short version.
And I'm assuming HTTPS is with the AWS. We can't do that with Django, right?
You can do it with anything, but you have to. Yeah, that's a little out of scope. The short version is you have to go to like there are third-party official websites that provide
Hmm.
certificates and you have to register with them and then you sort of put the certificate of encryption on the server itself and that's what makes it HTTPS. Um, I didn't get there in the AWS lesson, but we'll see that probably next week. Yeah, and password encryption and stuff is a little outside scope. It's okay for us for all of this, like to think about the password being sent to the server in plain text for now. That's less of a concern. Though you're absolutely right that is a security issue. Yeah, it's just a little outside scope. Let's go ahead and let's modify a user though, and we can watch the password and other fields change. So I think what I want to be able to do here is I want to be able to modify, let's just say like maybe first name, last name, address. Maybe we want to modify password too. Let's start off with not worrying about the password and getting an update working, and then we'll add in the password. Oh, and it would help if I was in the right spot. Here we go. And so we can get rid of this code. And now let's do def put. And let's put this all inside a try except block. And the except block is going to look out for a validation error. And we'll print this just to be safe. And let me import um, validation error. So we're going to need to do a couple things here. I want to start off by just grabbing a copy of the data. And let me, in fact, copy this. And let's, in fact, copy this and make this a put request. And so again, we have the authorization header that we need. And we're gonna, we don't want to mess with the username. Email, I'm not going to worry about at the moment. Um, let's change the first name. Bob should have a first name. Bob should have a last name. Bob should have an address. And let's change Bob's display name to Bob Hope. So let's see what we need to do to get this working. Um, there's really two scenarios here. One is we use the serializer. One is we don't. Um, the serializer can get a little tricky. And we're going to run into a number of issues here. Um, and let me make sure I'm getting this right as I'm putting this together. Um, and let me in fact pull up some of my guide code real quick to look at. Because we're gonna do this, this is gonna fail, and then we're gonna do it slightly differently. Um, so we're gonna try to save the user, and then we'll return a response with the user data and a status of HTTP 200 okay. But we're gonna run into a lot of issues here. This isn't gonna succeed, but we're gonna talk through line by line why and what's going on. So the first error we see, field init got an unexpected keyword first name, and it gets called here in the user serializer. That one I was a little more surprised to see because we do have first name and last name here. I wonder if the issue is that an app user should have first name and last name because it inherits from abstract user. So I'm not sure what's causing that unexpected keyword argument, to be totally honest. If we cut these out, I think we'll still see errors. We see got unexpected keyword address. Oh, that may be part of the issue here, folks. I apologize. And yeah, we're seeing like a number of errors here. Um, from is valid, from other things. Like honestly, I think put can get a bit more complicated. And in fact, as I'm writing this, I apologize. I'm kind of like remembering that we have to modify in a user, which makes this even trickier because what I'm doing here really is about creating one. So I think the short answer is honestly for put, I'm less of a fan of using a serializer, right? Because this is how you create a new user. We have data, it comes in, we have that, and then we would create a brand new user. But the problem here is we need to modify a user that already exists. And so I have this data, but I also have a current user, right? That user is already there. And at this point, what I really want to do is like for each field in data, update it for the current user.
Sorry, I might be really stupid. I just don't remember if you had this, but what about partial equals true if you're adding it to the serializer? Could that be the reason?
Um, partial equals true is another thing, but even if we had done partial equals true, and this was my bad because my brain was kind of getting set up here. Um, I think the issue here is this is still creating a brand new user, right? On line 39. This is creating a brand new user. It's taking this data. The user serializer is not getting an existing user from the database. It's constructing a user serializer from this dictionary. Partial equals true just says, I don't need every single field to be here. And now I'm going to go ahead and create and save a new user to the database. Does that make sense? So
Is it bad practice that if you run into issues like this, to just have a different endpoint with
well, the issue
a
here,
specific function?
no, the issue here was just I did this wrong, to be totally honest. Um, like if we step back, because we don't need different endpoints, but these are different verbs, right? This is like API slash users. This is get API slash users, and then creating a new user is down here. So this was just honestly, this was just me making a mistake. And if we simplify this even more, let's get rid of the error handling code. Let's just think through what we need to do to update an existing user.
Actually, yeah, actually with this put, is it trying to get you to modify all users because you're not like calling like an ID specifically, like with self request and ID?
Great question. The answer is no, and the reason is because this is still an authenticated endpoint. So because of this auth token, what happens is, so, you're right though, in terms of like API design, actually really this should have the user ID. You're not wrong. Like if I'm designing a REST API, and this is where the user is a little special because I can grab the user from the token. But if we were doing a list, like here, you would be 1000% correct, right? If I want to modify a list, it's got to look like this. So that's a really good point, Jason. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And this is where, again, because we can grab the user from the auth token, the user object is a little special. So with our, when we're going to modify anything, the first thing we got to do is grab the current user from the database. And the good news here is that Django has done that work for us. Because we have this auth token here, this request object already has the current user. Now, one way or another, whether we use a serializer or not, we need to go through all the fields, aka the keys in data, and for each one, update the value of it for the current user. Like, for example, if we're looking at, first name, Bob, address, 123 South Lane, then we have to update first name, address for the current user that already exists. And honestly, in a lot of ways, I don't think the serializer is the right tool for this. There probably is a way to use a serializer for this, maybe. I don't know it off the top of my head. Um, I'd have to look. And to be honest, I think there's like limited value. Um, let's actually see. If someone knows, please do, because this is also me just not remembering. And frankly, with certain things with Django, like some things with Django, it's just easier not to get too complicated about it. So let's see if the internet can tell me what I'm forgetting. Otherwise, honestly, the answer here is to do it the simple way and not worry about serializers. Wow, I do really love this site find, but we're going to get a whole lot of stuff there. Though here you do see this Webflow diagram that we've sort of been seeing more of. Um, Interesting. There's a whole update API view class. Yeah, this is this is more complicated and more than we need to worry about. Um, Data equals request.data, partial equals true serializer save. Oh, I see how they do it. Okay. I was wrong. Jason, you were mostly right. This is also my brain being a little tired here. Um, what we can do is, according to this, and I'm going to pull this as a guide. This is basically the same thing that we had a minute ago. I do apologize. Um, we might run into some other problems here, but this is basically what we want. Because what we're doing is we're saying like serialized user equals user serializer. And here's the step I forgot. The current user that already exists, the instance of the user, let's just use current user that we have up there. Data equals data. And then like you were saying, Jason, partial equals true. Now we're going to run into some problems here, but that's okay. And this is also like you can see like this works, but this is what I was forgetting and it's a pain. And there's something, to be said for like the simple way of address equals, data get address. Just manually doing it and doing this manually for all the fields we want to update.
Will that hash a password?
We would probably have to use the same password setting logic that we did when we created the user to begin with. And I'm not sure that the serializer approach will deal well with passwords when we throw that into the mix. Uh,
It looks like abstract user has a built-in function for self that's just self.setPassword, and
oh
it
yeah,
takes care of the hashing.
yeah, exactly. So like, doing it, really actually our user.address. My apologies. This is definitely my brain on a Friday. So this is the simple way. And honestly, I recommend it, right? We, because this is not dealing with serializers. This is using the get method on a dictionary that we know and love that grabs the key. And if the key doesn't exist, we give it the default value of the current value of the thing. So this is, the simple manual way without serializers. And I think we'll come back to the serializers in a bit. And then, like you were saying, we do have to deal with the password. And we're going to have to do it a little differently because we have to get the password. And then if there is a new password that we want to update, then we have to do stuff. We need to authenticate and log in the user. Or authenticate the user and use the password, which actually, I'm not sure if we need to. Yeah, I do think we need to use authenticate. Oh no, I apologize, folks. I got a little confused here. I don't think we need to do this. Let's see if this works without it. My apologies, because there's a couple different ways to implement this. And I think the sort of guide code I'm looking at takes a different approach. I think what we could just do here maybe is current user dot set password, new password, and we do a full clean and a current user dot save and return response. Now we've changed all this stuff. So let's just user serializer current user dot data status equals HTTP 200. So I'm not sure that this is going to work if I'm being totally honest, but let's see how we do. So just to recap, what this code is doing is we make a put request, we grab the data, we can get the current user off the request
Wait,
object.
don't lines 49 to 51 need to be indented?
Nope, they don't.
Okay.
This is just for,
Okay, that's on its own. Okay.
yeah. We only update the password if it's changed. And in fact, this should probably be new password to avoid other complications or confusions since there's a model field named password. So we're hitting put API / users. The user's authenticated, so they've got an auth token. The current user lives on the request object. We're doing the simple manual way to update each individual field. So if I wanted to add last name, I'd have to do the same thing here for last name as well. For the password, we're grabbing the new password. We're not calling the field name password because that might make a serializer complain later on. If there is a new password, we're using the built-in to Django set password method, and then we're doing validation and saving it. So there's a good chance here there's something I've gotten wrong, but let's see how this works. So we do indeed have an error. Let's see what this error is. Let me in fact clear this and let's look at the body of this request. Let's hit this again. And it looks like the error message is object of type int has no length. let's see. I'm not sure what I'm running into here. Let me hit a get endpoint real quick just to make sure everything's working. Yep. Okay, so let's debug this. Let's debug this with print statements. Let's print the current user. Let's print the new password. Let's see if we even get that far. And thank you all for bearing with me. As you can see, the password makes it a little more complicated to update. If we go up here now, so this is good. We do get the current user, new password, none. That's fine. We shouldn't be getting into here at all. So let's add a print statement to make sure we're not getting into here. And I wonder if it's this full clean validation step that's killing us because something is failing validation. So let's try, in fact, wrapping this in a try except. And let's just put print finished validation. And we'll return a response. And it will be the error message and a HTTP 400. And we'll print out the validation error too. And let's see if this gives us better data on what I have wrong in my code. So I'm not seeing better data, unfortunately. We do see here, let's see, full clean, current user full clean. Something is going wrong with full clean. I'm not totally sure what, unfortunately. I may need to take 5 to debug this offline, though I feel like this is we're pretty close.
I'm just gonna say something potentially dumb.
Yeah, no.
Okay, age shouldn't be wrapped up in a string, should it, with 18? It's good as is.
Oh, no, I think you're totally right. Um, though we're not doing anything with age, but I didn't even think about type. And since we're not using a serializer, that could totally be an issue. But in fact, let's simplify this. Let's just try to change the first name, and that will tell us something. So, unfortunately, that's not the issue. That would have been really nice if it was. Um, yep. I do apologize here because we could try this approach with the serializer. It might,
Do we have to do the full clean?
yeah, we don't have to, but we're probably going to run into some other sort of problem. Actually, that did work. So, huh. That's a great idea, Jason. As we can see here, without full clean, we end up with an empty last name, which is okay. And actually, I feel like you just won the debugging prize of the moment. Interesting. So that totally works. I wonder what the heck is going wrong with full clean here and the current user. I'm a little surprised that anything would go wrong because it's not like we change a lot and we already grab a user that exists. So there must be something. Because if we comment out everything and we just do full clean, let's see if this even works. So we still get, yeah. So long story short, there's something silly here I'm doing. We probably have hit a point of diminishing returns though, unfortunately. Um, we've seen how to do this. Frankly, using the serializer this way, I think with the password, it might cause a bit of a problem, though we could try it. Um, I think it would look something like this.
Instead of
Yeah.
trying to change the password to an endpoint, why not make it a method on your user model?
Well, the good news is we have a method on the user model that we get already. Um, I think the real question is like handling the password update here. The user serializer might work. Um, I think what probably makes more sense is let's use this approach with the serializer on updating a list. And then let's come back to this because something with the full clean here is throwing me off. And also the user model is just a little more complicated. So if we hop over to lists and let me pull up the list app here with views, I've sort of put together a put here um, to look at this. And if we make a copy of this request where we're going to update lists and let's update list 5. And just to make sure my endpoint's right, let's test it with a get method. And we get a list back. I'm not going to worry about updating tasks or anything like that. But let's see if we can't change like the name of this list from movies to music. So we're going to go ahead and grab the list we want by doing self.getList and passing in the request and the list ID. And then we're going to use the list serializer. And Jason, this is what you were saying before, and what I was getting wrong is we can pass into the serializer an existing list object and data we want to change. So let's also grab the data from our requests. And like you were saying, Jason, set partial to true. And again, my apologies for getting off on this one before. And now we can follow kind of the pattern that we're much more used to, where we can say if this is valid, then we save it and return a response that has the serialized list data and HTTP success status. Otherwise, we return a response that has the errors and a status code of 400. We might run into one or two things with list serializer we need to fix, but we can fix that along the way. So that actually seems to work just fine. And in fact, let's go ahead, let's change its completed status to true. And this works great, right? So we might be able to do this with the user. Maybe I overcomplicated things here. But we can see actually this does work quite nicely with the serializer. Now, the one thing going on with the list serializer is if I go over here to the list app serializer, Tim, you had asked me about read only true before for tasks. If we get rid of that and we do this put update, I do think we'll have a problem. And actually, I'm a little surprised that we don't. I kind of would have thought that the task serializer would have kicked in and we would have had an issue here. I suppose it's actually because we have the partial equals true. I think this is what's doing it for us. If we don't have partial equals true, then we run into all sorts of problems. If we get rid of partial equals true, now we get an error that says tasks, this field is required, user, this field is required. Now, here with tasks, if we set this to read only equals true, let's see what happens when we do this put request. So there's this sort of interesting behavior. If you set something to read only, then the serializer will ignore it when you try to create stuff, but we still run into, without using partial equals true, using a serializer in the update. Let me go to our using a serializer to update like this, where again, first we have the existing model object and then the changes. The serializer is strict, right? It's unhappy if anything required is missing. But with partial equals true, we're good to go. And now, in fact, I think now that I got this working for something simpler, I think we go back here to our user view in the user app, and we kind of come back to this. I think we actually can make some headway here. And I'm just going to kind of comment all this stuff out for the moment. And let's see if we can make this work. And in fact, I think what we'll just do is we'll make a whole different put endpoint. So let's comment out all this. And here we'll do put self request. And first, let's grab the user. And then let's grab the data. And let's, in Postman, go back to our other requests for updating a user. So we want to change Jason to Joseph. And now we'll deal with passwords in a second. But let's try using the serializer and see if I can get it right this time. So the serialized user is going to be user serializer. The current user, data is the stuff we want to change, and partial equals true. And if that's valid, save the new user, return a response that has the user data and a success code. Otherwise, return a response that has the errors and an error code. Now, we'll see if this works. And actually, that works pretty great. Let's see how far we can get. Last name should be easy. Email. How about display name? How about age? Now that we're using the serializer. And here we did run into an issue, type int has no length, which is interesting. And I wonder which
Why don't we
one.
just take off age? Like leave everything else but age and see what happens, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I bet that it is age. If we get rid of age, yeah. So this is where, I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure. I would have expected the serializer to handle that, to be totally honest. But the issue might be,
Quick, try putting age in quotes just to humor me. Like have age, but just put in quotes as opposed to an integer.
oh, put it in quotes where?
So I'm saying when you try to change the age instead of having the
Oh,
variable be an integer, could you maybe just put the integer in a string?
yeah,
Just
that's a
happens.
great idea. Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's already 18. Can we make it like something else?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
make like 20 or something or 44? Yeah. Huh. Doesn't like age.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with age. That's so interesting. That might have been what's throwing us off before. Let's try password because that's the big one. And this one I think also is going to have issues. Among the issues being, if we look at the user serializer, password is not a field here. So watch what happens with password. I'm a little surprised that worked. I'll be honest, I don't have a high degree of confidence that the password
Password probably didn't
necessarily
change because you
changed.
didn't have it in the serializer.
Say that again?
The password probably didn't change because I just remember a few days ago, we
Yeah.
didn't have it in the yeah, didn't have value in the serializer while it's still accepted. It didn't change value.
Yeah, you're totally right. That's exactly what's happening here. This password has not changed at all. If we go to the database and check, we'll see it'll be hashed, but it'll be the exact same password. Here's how to deal with password, and this is actually a good pattern to see.
I would be curious about how to fix age though, like why it's only lets us change a string and not like a different value type.
Yeah, I don't know if it's on the model. I don't know if we did something silly on the model for users. It's a positive integer field. Um, I don't know either, but let's get
What's your max? Oh, max length validator. It should be
oh, okay.
max value validator.
Yeah,
That's
good
why.
call. All right. That's programmer error 1000%.
Well, I did something dumb the other day where I had min value for both. Min value validator for the min and the max, and that
Yeah.
lost a lot of time over that.
No, that's a good eye though. I mean, and now the error makes sense. Um, Now if we do this, yeah, yeah, Jason, great eye, and thank you. Um, so my little mini retro on how I could have done a better job of debugging is we should have been looking at that user model way sooner in the debugging process. That's my takeaway here. So like next time I do this, that's what I would change. Let's see how to do password now that we have the age mystery solved. So the first thing is when you've got a field where it's kind of protected or you're not using it in the serializer, when you're changing it, don't use the same name. Use something else like new password. And then what we're going to do here is we are going to grab the new password from the data. And I'm going to use .get so that if it's not there on the dictionary, it sets it to none. And then I'm going to, if new password is not none, and I want to make sure that .get, can someone confirm that the default value here will indeed be none if there's no new password? Does that sound right?
I found that when I've done something like that, I had to put none as a second parameter or argument after new path.
Yeah. And you know what? There's no harm in doing this anyway. So if new password is not none, the first thing we're going to do is we're gonna remove this from the data object. I think, can someone remind me, is this the right way to delete a key value pair from a dictionary? Does this look right to folks?
I think it's right.
Yeah, let's double check real quick. Let's make a little dictionary here in Python. So I've got my dictionary. Let's do delete foo a. Now it's gone. Let's also do like a equals foo.get, as long as we're doing this. Let's see, a equals none. So I do like to have sort of the Python REPL open for little experiments like that. So we've deleted this, and the reason this is important is it's a good idea to try and keep the data object that you stick into the serializer clean. Even though this isn't in here, even though it's not the same name, if we made a mistake or the code was different and this was the same as something else, it could potentially cause problems. So just trying to keep stuff clean and organized is really nice. And now that we know we have a new password, I think what we're going to do is we are just going to, let's just in here, let's just do our user set password, new password. And does anyone know, do I have to do our user save after set password, or does this save to the database?
I believe you need to do dot save also.
You are probably right. It does not automatically save to the database. You have to save. If save is not called, the changes will not persist. So we need to save. We should probably just do full clean. Hopefully that does some sort of password validation. So here we're handling password update. And here we update everything else. So I don't remember how to get the plain text password off the top of my head, and it's a little trickier to be honest. So I think what we can do is let's do, if we look at the tables real quick, we're looking at the user app user table. Let's select password from user app user. And it's user app user. And I think we also need like email because I need to figure out who we're interested in. Let's see, we're looking at Joseph's. Joseph's our email right now. So really what we need is we need the password from user app email, or from user app user where email equals joseph@gmail.com. So this is the hashed password. What we're going to see is if the hash password changes when I change the password. So let's put something in here that's different. Let's go to our server and see if this, first of all, see if this works. It works, which is really exciting. Now let's run our query. I'm actually not sure if that changed. Let's try, And I think after this, we're definitely at a stopping point because I realize we've hit about 3 o'clock central.
Could we real quickly do a delete as well so we cover the whole crud?
Yeah, totally. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. So that actually did change. It's extremely hard to tell because these hashes are super long and the beginning of it is the same. But if you look at the very end of the hash, let me grab the annotator. If you look at the end of the hash, the very end of this is like ZBLKH4KS, blah, 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 blah. And this is like HXVT0, blah, 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 blah. So we can see that the password really did change. Thank you guys so much for your help with this. Hopefully the learning journey was good, even if it was a bit long. And what we now have, though, is a really nice pattern where when I want to modify something, I can use a serializer, and I know I need partial equals true. We also saw we can set read only equals true if there's some fields we want to ignore entirely for updating. And we've seen a really nice pattern for sort of special cases where maybe there's something we're updating where in the JSON, its name is not the same as the actual model name for a good reason. Or even if it is, we want to handle it in a special way and we delete it from this data object. So this is a really good pattern that you can use for updating, right? And if you want to do nested updates, to be honest, this is something like this is not the worst way to do it, where you deal with all the nested stuff in a for loop right here or something like that. Do folks have any questions on this one before we implement a delete? And then I think it's probably a good time to call it.
No, this definitely is going to be useful since I know I want to have my users to be able to change their password. I'm just gonna copy and paste and change the field name for different things so I don't have to go through the hassle or different endpoints.
Yeah. And I think like as you can see, like it's actually a really good practice, like once you have guide code to follow it. Because when you've been coding for 4 hours and like I did a little while ago, and I forget that to update with the serializer, I gotta pass in, the existing model object first, that can be a hard one to debug if there's not, some other folks to help and get eyes on the code as well. Um, totally. Let's implement delete, and if people want to, and if there's time, maybe we can do a nested put, but I think seeing delete is good. So users, we're not going to really delete. I don't really want to delete a user. I do want to delete, let's delete a task. And let's close most of this stuff out. And let's go to our views for the task app. And let's go to an individual task. And we actually didn't do much here, but let's go ahead and let's actually delete an individual task. And this will be good because we get to see a new API route as well. And the endpoint here, it's a delete HTTP verb sent to API/lists/whatever the list ideas /tasks/our task ID. And just as a quick refresher, the list app has this part right here. And then it points to the URLs PY for the task app. And I had this commented out, but now let's uncomment it. And now this is the endpoint that we're going to hit. And so now I want to go ahead and I want to delete a task. And the first thing I want to do is get the task. And because this is an authenticated request, I can do request. Let's in fact make our helper method that we know and love, because we can use get object or 404, and it's a good pattern. So we'll do self request, and this really only needs the task ID. Well, we might as well pass both. It actually does. It actually probably does need both. And we're going to do return get object or 404 request dot user dot lists dot get ID equals list ID. And we're going to do a little chaining on here, some method chaining, and say for that list now get the tasks. And get the task where the ID equals the task ID. Now, we'll have to see if I got this syntax wrong, but I think it will work. And let's test it out here real quick, in fact. And let's return a response that has, we now need to serialize our task. And return that data dictionary and a status of success. So real quick, let's test out this endpoint. And again, I'm just going to copy this because it's got the auth. There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Let me close out these ones that we don't want. Interesting. Doesn't seem to be copying the auth token. That's fine. It was just me being a little lazy. Oh, I see. I apologize. This what it really is it being 3 o'clock on a Friday. I was looking at the wrong part of Postman. These are query params. In fact, you guys kind of saw here if I had like Q equals cats and we want to search for cats. Frankly, I like just typing it in the URL bar, but everything after the question mark, as in query or question, you can add that way as well. But that's not what we want. What we want is our authorization header right here. And we want a get endpoint, and we just want to grab the first task from list 5.
Wait, so queries become like their own headers?
No, it's not headers. It's just the user interface for Postman. I honestly don't like this because I think it is confusing. Query params live in the URL. They're not headers. The Postman user interface just makes them both look the same.
That was confusing.
Yeah. And I think I just have let's see, an indentation error on line 55. We just need to say pass. And let's see if the server works now. And let's see, not found, API lists 5. So let's try tasks. And let's do ID 2. And I think the problem was I just forgot to in the route. And it looks like we do have some not found issue here. So that tells me this is probably not working. I'm pretty sure my routing is correct and we're getting to line 41, but something is wrong here. So let's test that theory with the print statement. Yep, we're not even seeing that. Let's see if we're even getting to our endpoint. And it doesn't appear we're even getting to the endpoint. So I must have something incorrect here in the URL's PY. And indeed I do. I totally forgot I need int task ID. And I should probably close that out.
Do we need the word tasks as well?
No,
I guess.
because
Well,
yeah,
I mean, I guess as long as you don't have it over there, maybe.
that comes from the list app
Oh,
URLs PY right here.
oh, okay. Oh, you're okay.
Yeah, it's a little confusing to be honest. Like there's an argument to be made, to be honest, instead of doing it this way. Um, well, no, it's nice to do it this way because you have all your list related routing here. And then when you're interested in tasks belonging to a list, you go here. So it feels a little extra, but as your code gets bigger, it's a good pattern. Um, so this is great because this is the good kind of error. Um, we're indeed getting there. Now we have a server error. First argument to get object or 404 must be a model manager or query set, not a task. So this should be an easy fix. I'm doing way too much on this line of code. That's the problem here. So the answer here, the answer whenever you have a problem like that is always to break the code down. So let's in fact do list equals request dot user dot lists dot get ID equals list ID. And let's print out the lists and let's do get object or 404 of that. And let's do task equals get object or 404 of list dot tasks dot get where ID equals task ID. And chances are I'm doing something silly here in one of these because my brain is tired. But now with these print statements, we can see exactly how far we get and what the problem is.
Well, let's fix line 45.
Yeah. And now we return um oh yeah, in fact, we don't want to return the serialized task. We just want to return the task. And we do the serialization with it later. So let's see how this does. And it looks like the error is probably coming from it's probably coming from right here. Um, I think this is just my brain being tired because now that I'm thinking about this, I think this is what get object or 404 should look like, and I was confusing two different things. So let's try it like that and see how we do. And I realize, Tim, this detour to delete took a bit longer than we want. But now I've got a task. I've got a single task. It's kind of nice because we see something a bit more complex. We also saw a nice debugging strategy of take one complex thing and break it into a bunch of simpler ones. And again, we can see like once your brain starts getting tired, then, the programmer errors increase. Now that I can get a task, let's delete it, right? Because that's really what we're interested in. So let me take a quick look at my guide code that we're using here to make sure my deletion logic is going to be good. But deletion is pretty straightforward. I get the task. In fact, let's just print the task so we can see that it's there. And then I just do task dot delete. And I think this returns a tuple. Um, if we hop over here and we do like Django model delete, we can quickly see what it returns. I'm pretty sure it's a tuple with like the ID and a Boolean. Um, here we go. Let's find the delete method reference real quick. Yeah, a little annoyed it doesn't tell me here what this returns. Um,
Just right click it in VS Code and go to definition.
yeah, I'm not sure it'll. Oh, yeah, because it doesn't. VS Code can't quite figure out that this is an instance of a model.
Hmm.
But what we could do actually is if we go to one of our models and we go to models.model and we right click on that definition, that's a good idea. Let's find def delete. Here we go. So this is where there's like all this stuff. It returns collector dot delete. Who knows what collector is? This is getting a little too deep. I'm pretty sure, though it is fun digging into this, we can go to the definition here. We can look for delete in here. And then eventually it's going to return something. Um, yeah, count. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it returns like the number of things that were deleted and a dictionary telling us what tables, I think. So let's just call this like delete message, and let's just print delete message, and let's just return a response, and the status is going to be HTTP 200.
Could you maybe just do like type delete message or something like that to see what the type is with that on line 64?
I can. I'm like 99% sure what it is like a count and like a delete. It's like a little dictionary saying which different models were deleted, because if there's cascading, maybe it's not just a list that I deleted, but all the tasks that were in that list. I was kind of like 80 to 90% sure, and then glancing at that code gave me a bit more confidence. Let's run this though and just see how we do, just to kind of test this out. So now all we should have to do here is change this to delete. There's nothing in the body of my request that we need. And we get a 200 OK. Nothing is sent back. We actually can send something back, and we probably should. And if I look all the way down here, we see what was deleted. What it's telling us here is that one thing was deleted, and here we have the breakdown, and it's telling us that one instance of a task was deleted. So if I deleted a whole list, we'd see a whole lot more, because we'd see a list and all its tasks. Um, and in fact, if we want to implement this for deleting a list, let's go ahead here and kind of copy and modify a bit. And we don't need a task ID. And we're not grabbing a task, we're grabbing a list. And we are about to delete our list that has all the stuff. So this is going to be a sort of cataclysmic moment. Um, just so we can see, we're going to delete list 5 that has these 2 tasks. So I'm going to change this to a delete. So let's actually look at the same endpoint, list 5 with 2 tasks. And now we're going to say goodbye forever to list 5 that's been our companion through this whole journey today. And we see here 3 things were deleted, 2 task model objects, and 1 list. And we, in fact, even saw a cascade.
Let's try to get it. See what happens.
Sorry?
Oh, I
Oh,
was saying let's like get it and see what error message we get, like doesn't exist or whatever.
oh yeah. No, we'll totally get a 404. And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of get object or 404. We get a 404 not found. Yeah, list 5 is gone forever. Um, all right, folks, this was awesome. Thank you for sticking through this journey. If there's like one more thing that people want to see, I'm happy to do it for a couple more minutes, but it's been a very solid afternoon review. And also I probably am at the point now where I'll just start making more bugs than valuable code. So let's um though I'm happy, let's definitely take questions actually, because I've been writing a lot of code. So, what questions do people have before we wrap up, whether around put or delete or anything else?
I just gonna make sure. Could you just make sure to upload your code? And have you been recording all this too?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
definitely want the video lectures and the code demos and notes.
yeah, definitely. This morning demos and notes was already pushed. I'll push
Yeah.
this stuff up as soon as we're done, and the videos will be up shortly.
Okay. And I guess when you release the assessment, I'm at least gonna do a look over, just in case I have any questions.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a good reminder. I'm going to release the assessment in literally as soon as we wrap this up. Um, Definitely give the assessment a once over. Remember to kick the tires by cloning the repo down and running tests. I think you'll find like there's a couple twists and turns, but a lot of what we covered here today is maybe even a little more advanced than parts of the assessment. So fingers crossed, I think you all will enjoy it. What questions do folks have, or what might be good to review here, whether it's with this put endpoint or our delete endpoint, or anything else?
Something real quick that I think would help us. You, what was the name of the extension that you said that live updates the REPL? Because I feel like if we have like an active like live REPL, it'd be easier to just use code
Oh,
to
you
check
mean
it.
for like models and stuff in the Django shell?
Yeah.
It's called Shell Plus. There's a tutorial I dropped in somewhere in the Zulu channel if you dig it up. Just be aware, it's not too hard to set up. Actually, I'll demo that now for anyone who's interested. As soon as we finish up questions here, because I can demo that in a couple minutes. You will have to add an extra step to like settings PY, so that's the only thing to be aware of. Um, yeah, that'll be cool to see. What other questions do folks have? What do people want to dig into? Is there any other code that we'd like to write?
I myself feel pretty fried after that review.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. No, this was a long one, and I appreciate you all bearing with me. I hope it was helpful though, and the code here will be pushed up. And Jason and Tim, thank you guys for your help in finally getting our put endpoints working. And I think maybe that's the last thing that's worth walking through, right? So to modify a list, I'm going to make a copy of the data that's coming in. I'm going to grab the list that already exists in the serializer. I'm going to pass in the list that already exists. I'm going to pass in the new data I want to update, and I have to set partial to true. Then we do what we do with serializers where we check if it's valid, and if it is, we return a response. And the one wrinkle here is for sort of special cases like updating a password or where there's stuff in the JSON body of the request that doesn't directly map to a model field, we might have to write some logic in the view code. This is actually really normal. Don't be afraid to put logic in the view code. Let me say that again. Don't be afraid to put logic in the view code. That's totally fine, and it's what they're for. And here what we do is, because this is a little special for updating a password, we check for it. If it's there, we actually delete it from this data object so that when it goes into the serializer, it doesn't have this unwanted new password field. Here in the view, we write our own logic to manually set the new password and save it. And then the rest of updating the user is exactly the same, right? And the error that was driving me nuts was I made a mistake with the validators. And Jason, thank you again for helping with that. All right, let me very quickly show folks Shell Plus. If you want to hop now, go for it, and then we can call it a day.
Yeah, I gotta get my daughter off the bus, so unfortunately I had to go this second.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to keep going, just so that anyone who wants this can see it. Um,
Yeah, yes, yeah, sounds good. I just gotta go.
yeah, absolutely. Have a good one. So Shell Plus is pretty easy to set up. We do have to install this library Django extensions. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. What we're installing here, by the way, is called Django Shell Plus, and you can see the docs here. Um, but Google AI does a pretty good job of walking through it. We are going to have to add this Django extensions library that we installed to settings PY. And let's just put that, oh, right there. I do need to install one other thing. I need to install a library called IPython that is actually going to be used by Shell Plus. And that's actually sort of the fancy shell. And you do have to do this for each Django project, and that's the only reason we kind of don't have it in the curriculum. And once that's done, that should be about it. Now running it is a little different. The command here is shell plus and then dash dash IPython. So instead of Python manage.py shell, though it looks like this one has actually using IPython, we do Python manage py shell plus IPython. And now I actually have all my models in here. I might even have my serializers. We don't have the serializers, but we have all the models. So IPython has a bunch of other fancy things with like debugging and some other stuff. And as you can see, it's got colors. But that's the essence of it, and that's kind of the nice part. I threw in the Zulu channel, there is a short like link to a tutorial on that. But To be honest, actually, the Google AI stuff does a pretty good job. But if you look in the Zulu channel, if you search for like Shell Plus, it'll be there. It's also, I'm pretty sure it's like this link right here. Yeah, it is in fact this one. It's like the first search result that just walks through these same steps. All right. Folks, thank you so much for sticking around. I hope this was useful. Let me go ahead and stop the recording.